It is 4:19 on Tuesday, April 16th, and we will call this special City Commission budget work session to order. If we could have a roll call, please. City Manager Chapman.
Mayor Gary,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Bauer, Commissioner Marble,
Here.
Commissioner Rubenstein,
Here.
Commissioner Bospis Rath,
Here.
Commissioner Habusta,
Here.
Commissioner Gage.
Here.
We
Motion
get
to
a mo-
excuse.
Thank you.
Motion to excuse Commissioner Bauer.
Support.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? He is excused. If everybody could please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. We will move right into item B, which is special orders of business, review of budget for fiscal year 2024-2025. Turn it over to you, City Manager. Do we have a kind of a rules of engagement before we start?
Yeah,
Okay.
so we'll dive into the budget. We'll go through it fund by fund, line by line. If there's any questions or discussion, just stick your hand up and kind of wave if I don't see you at first. But this is just as much of an informational process for you all regarding the budget. So if you have any questions, there are no bad questions. So feel free to ask them. We do have, when Robin comes back up here, we do have the hitter wish list, which is the process in which we go through. If you want to change something, raise your hand, make your hit if you want to add, or no, hit if you want to reduce, wish if you want to add to something. Typically what we do is we don't necessarily get into a whole lot of discussion about those tonight. What we do is we take those requests, we send them out to the department heads. We put together an informational memo, more or less, an informational memo. We come back the following Monday, a week from yesterday, so the 22nd, and we would have the budget reconciliation meeting at which those items would be taken up individually. Last couple of years, we haven't needed that meeting, but it's scheduled if we do need it. So if you have anything, again, any questions or comments or anything, just feel free to raise your hand, or if I don't see you, just interrupt me. And then if you have anything that you want to make adjustments to, just let us know. We'll write it down, send it to the department heads, and bring it back for the following Monday meeting. So it's kind of the operations. Did I miss anything? Nope. I got the thumbs up from Kristen. So any questions out the gate? Anything about that? All right. All right. So
Set the timer.
set the timer. All right, so we'll get into the budget book. The budget book, the way it is kind of the order that we'll go through. We've got general fund, DBW, major streets, locals, stock and equipment, water, sewer, and then some of the other smaller funds. So that's kind of the order we'll take it in. Again, if you have any questions or concerns as we go through, just feel free to interrupt and be happy to have a discussion about them. So general fund 101. So first couple of pages 3, 4, 5, going into page 5. First, pardon? Bonnie, you want to throw it up on the screen? So we're gonna have Bonnie have the budget book up there, and she'll just kind of move along with us. So starting off with revenues for the general fund. In total, we're projecting a $15 million budget for our revenues. A lot of things are stagnant, not a lot of movement in certain items like our permits or our licenses. We are seeing an increase in our tax revenue for city operating solid waste and police and fire pension. I guess just taking a step back too. So the yellow column is the projected where we're anticipating ending this current fiscal year. The pink column is the department requested. The orange is the manager recommended budget. And then the two different colored green columns would be year 2. And to be honest, year 2 is informative, but a lot of this discussion is usually based on year 1, so that orange column there, 24-25 manager recommended budget. So we're done. There goes the timer. All right, so getting back to revenues, you see an increase in the tax revenue, city operating, solid waste, police, fire, pension. Again, most things are kind of stagnant, moving across the board. One of the things is the marijuana cannabis permit fees as well as the shared revenue. The permits themselves are stagnant. That's based on the number of open establishments that we have. There's an annual permit that they have to get processed through community development. The other line item would be the share of revenues that come from having those enterprises within the city. Some of the other bigger line items that we have within the revenues include the revenue sharing, constitutional and statutory. Slight increase in both of those buckets, nothing major. Revenue sharing, there is some money coming in from the public safety side of things, about $9,900. Resource officer, you'll kind of see that. That's something that's not new, but that is covering the cost for our school resource officer from the school district. That's at $105,000. I think this is the 3rd year of the contract, so I think we're at 2nd year of the 3-year contract. So we'll have to negotiate that in the future year. But another big item that we do have is the ambulance service. It's a huge portion of our budget. We're anticipating about $1.5 million in revenues. Just under that, we do have some of our adjustments with those processes. Anything that's not collected through the bills, we have to write off. So a little bit of a decrease because of those write-offs. On Osborne, the campground, that's a big pull-in for us. You see that's kind of stagnant there, but that's a good-sized portion of our budget. Some smaller grant reimbursements for some other operations. So all in all, revenue is about $15,222,500. Last couple of years, been about 14.6, 14.4, so slight increase in our revenues coming in from the general fund, anticipated in year 1 next fiscal year. Any questions or comments on the revenues? Did I miss anything, Kristen? Okay. All right. So from there, we'll move into the appropriations, the expenditure side of the budget. First and most importantly is the city commission budget. Huh? No joke? Okay. I like it. You like it.
Depends on where the contingency goes.
Yeah. We, for the most part, the city commission budget is straightforward. Your salaries and wages, we've included those. There's not a big increase there. You have your personnel costs coming down, your FICA, Medicare, workers' comp. Slight supply budget in case we need anything. Dues and subscriptions, that covers your Michigan Municipal League subscription. Chamber of Commerce, we have in there. Travel and training. Travel and training, we budgeted about $5,000 for the next fiscal year. We can always increase that as we move forward if there's more commissioners that are looking to go to an MML conference. I wasn't quite sure what to estimate for the travel and training for next year just based on the election and who's going to be here. So if we need to, we can do an adjustment on that one. The contingency line item, we have about $81,000 in there. That's kind of a placeholder. There was some, I don't want to say surplus, but there was a little bit of extra money when we went through this process. We wanted to set it aside in case we needed it for anything moving forward, any kind of personnel changes that we may need to make in the future or anything like that. So the contingency is there. It's about $81,000. And any kind of use of that would probably be followed up with a budget adjustment from that line item to whatever particular department we have through the action of the city commission. So, what's that?
Personnel changes in the city commission?
No. Part of the conversations that we've been having is maybe the joint EDC DDA director. So we didn't necessarily have a budget for that. We didn't know how to, if that was going to move forward or not. So there is some money set aside if that does happen. So.
We had one in the past, but I think we had to axe it. Contingency? Yeah.
Am I supposed to be using my microphone or not?
I think
we
I
probably
think
are,
so, just
yeah.
because we're on TV, yeah. I guess that's a good point of order too.
Use your mics, please.
Yeah,
Back when we used the contingency fund for the first part of the year until it was used up, if general fund, was needed as a funding source for some budget amendment, it would just say contingency. And then when that 81,000 or 50,000, whatever it was used up, you would say that in the agenda memo.
any questions on the commission budget? All right, next one's the city manager budget. For the most part, it's pretty static. We have increases in wages, just like we have for every other budget. Including in our item, and you'll see these throughout, is a lot of the fringe benefits, your Social Security, Medicare, all your other little taxes on there. So that's usually a big portion of all these budgets. But the salaries cover my salaries as well as my administrative assistant. In terms of any major changes, my travel budget stayed the same. We did throw in an extra $10,000 in contracted services. There was some conversations around the department head table at one point about maybe doing some different activities within the organization. I put $10,000 in there just to cover some of those expenses if we do move forward on them. Travel and training, static going across the board too, so. Any questions on the city manager budget? All right, we'll move down to general appropriations. So this category are appropriations that we give to specific uses within the organization and outside. There's two dial-a-ride appropriation, quote-unquote appropriations. There's the grant pass-through that comes in for operations for dial-a-ride, which goes right to community action as they're the administrator for dial-a-ride. There's also a direct appropriation for dial-a-ride. This is what they requested a couple commission meetings ago when they were here, if you'll recall. EDC appropriation has been zeroed out still, and then the DDA appropriation is coming in about $46,000 for this current year.
Just a comment, thank you for continuing to support the Saturday service, so appreciate it.
Not a problem. Any questions on appropriations? Alrighty, our finance department, the next budget. For the most part, it's a smaller budget, not a lot of changes. Any increase in salaries is an assumption of wage increases based on the clerical contract and following up with the department heads and non-union employees. So there's a slight increase in the salaries moving forward there. For the most part, the line items are still about the same where we've been in last year. $800 for supplies, $6,400 for contracted services. There's some money in there for dues and subscriptions. Our audit fees is in this budget about $25,400, and some travel and training so the staff can maintain their continuing training, CTEs, continuing training and education credits as required by their professional licenses? Yeah. Any questions on that one? All right, moving down into the clerk's department. Same as the finance for the most part. This is covering the 3 staff members in the clerk's department. Any increase in the salaries is just anticipated contractual increases or follow-up with non-rep and department heads. Not a lot of major increases in here. For the most part, it's pretty static. In this budget, we include our insurance, pay of claims, our insurance costs, equipment rental, dues and subscriptions.
What is pay of claims?
Pay of claims is what our share, the portion of an insurance claim would come in. So if we have a insurance claim come in, that's for the general fund where that item would be paid. So paying our deductible.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Speaking of clerks, they just axed all your budget, so.
One big line item in this department is the IT fund. So you'll see in that it's over 300,000, and that is the entire general fund's use of IT services, which is software, phones, everything.
Yep. And there is a change elections has their own budget. It'll be a little bit later on, so this doesn't necessarily cover the cost of elections. So, any questions on the clerk's budget? All right, moving down to city assessors. This budget covers 2 staff members. Again, any wage increases is just anticipated future wage increases for the next fiscal year. For the most part, it's pretty static. There is a little bit increase, I believe, in their supplies. They're gonna buy some more storage units than what they traditionally have, so there's a slight increase in supplies. But for the most part, everything else is pretty static. Any questions on the assessing budget? All righty. Moving down to elections, I just mentioned this is the budget that covers just the elections. Part-time seasonal staff, that is all of Robin's election workers that cover the areas for us, as well as contracted services, postage for all the absentee ballots, the printing, software and user maintenance for all the equipment that we have to use, so.
Just a random question. Are the election workers paid hourly, or is it like a stipend, or?
You can take it.
They're paid hourly.
Okay.
And so it looks like the increase, based on the 9 days minimum pre-voting is 14,500. Do we get any assistance from the state?
So this past election was reimbursable by the state. We're also in a county-wide agreement, so all 17 jurisdictions within the county share the cost equally.
But this is just our share.
Correct.
Yeah.
Any other questions on elections? All right, moving down to Department 265 is City Hall. You'll notice part-time seasonal wages in here. This is for our part-time cleaner within City Hall. Our longtime custodian for City Hall has had some time off, so we put in a part-timer for this year. They'll kind of fill in the gaps with us, but this covers everything with City Hall: electricity, gas, heat, water. We have some repair and maintenance budgeted in there as things kind of stop working. The building's getting a little bit older, so there's some repair and maintenance that we have to do throughout the building, so. Anything major there? No? All right, next one is city attorney. For those of you that don't know, at one point in history, we did have an in-house attorney represent us. We have since switched that after the retirement. We have 2 line items now. We have legal fees and tax tribunal. Looking at what we're anticipating next year, we have decreased the tax tribunal attorney fees and pushed them up into the general counsel legal fees. For the most part, the dollar amount has stayed the same. It's about $100,000. We have been using our general counsel a lot more on different items, hence kind of the shift in the funds away from the tax tribunal up to the general counsel. So still estimate about coming $100,000. This year it looks like we're going to estimate about 72,000. So, you got a question?
Yes, can you just tell me how since we changed from going to a this contracted service, how the dollar amount has shifted, whether that's cost us money or saved us money?
So it kind of depends. I would say in general, it has saved us money, but there's an asterisk with that if we have a very busy year with attorneys, we could see it being more expensive. But the previous arrangement we had, I think the city attorney had a $50,000 salary, and then the attorney's firm billed us separately. Within his contract, he had like 3 or 4 different permissible charges: labor relations, tax tribunals. You remember what the other ones were? Lawsuits, and maybe one other thing. But and again, I would say it kind of depend on the work at that time too. But the last year that we had him, for example, he had his $50,000 salary, but because he was leading us through a tax tribunal case against Myers. Yeah, Myers. His firm, per his contract, was able to bill us for those hours. So there was an additional 120,000, I think, at the time before he retired. And then we kicked that case off to another tax tribunal attorney, which increased those costs. So it kind of, I would say in general, it has saved us money, but it can ebb and flow, especially with the tax tribunal stuff. If we have a big year with a lot of tax tribunal cases or a large tax tribunal case like a dark store, I mean, those things can be easily $200,000 just to settle. And if you go to court, I mean, the last one we did was $800,000 or a little bit more. So, I mean, they can be expensive. So I would say, the short of the answer would be, in general, we have saved money, but if we had a busy year, it could go up. But I think for the most part, we've been running under this kind of system since beginning of 2020, and I don't believe we've ever really gone over $100,000, whereas there were previous years, I guess we went over 131,000 the one year, but that was a tax tribunal. I would say, in general, it's saving us money. And again, just to throw it out there too, our attorney fees that we have budgeted for, they encompass a wide variety of services. So we have our general counsel, our labor attorney, any kind of special need attorney that may come up. For example, there's one that we're looking at kind of tapping into for some right-of-way Metro Act work that we need to have done. So, I mean, it's not just the one firm just getting all that money. There's some other uses in there too. So,
And this also includes the prosecutors.
oh, and that's right. We have a contract with the prosecutors to be our local ordinance, our local prosecutor, and I think that's about $22,500. City tickets, yes. Yep, local prosecutor. Yep. I forgot about that.
If commissioners wish, we could follow up with the historical report if you were interested.
Yeah.
I would love to see that historical report. Thank you.
And so just to be clear, we'll follow up with a historical report, but that's not a wish or hit or anything like that, correct?
No.
Okay, very good. Alrighty, we'll move on down to Department 271, fringe benefits. And I'm gonna toss that one to Kristen to remind me what that one means.
The only line item in the fringe benefits is the life insurance for retirees,
That's right. So
And
that's
we-
a post-employment benefit.
and it increased pretty dramatically because we got a recent quote from our provider that said it would practically double. So
Yeah.
that's what that increase is about.
Any questions on that one? All right, moving on down to one of our first big ones, the police department. You can see in the budget, in the budget again, we have included salaries. We're able to preserve all current budgeted positions for next fiscal year. We do have budget in there, the captain position again. We're anticipating, hopefully, to be full staffed pretty soon. We got a couple of recruits in the academy. We talked about that yesterday. We've got one more working through the process, so we are anticipating being up to snuff pretty soon, but there are also some anticipated retirements coming up. So, again, no staff position cuts to the police department. You'll see the whole stretch of all the fringe benefits, overtime, the different buckets for overtime, some of the supplies and equipment. For the most part, everything is staying pretty flat. We are increasing the budget a little bit for some more training for the police staff. There's an increase in the training line item. There's some money in there to upkeep the building, do some work in there. Animal control is also in this budget, just as an FYI. I know that's came up in the past as well. Any questions or comments about the police department?
Just a comment.
Yep.
Utility costs are significantly high in that building, and I'm just wondering if administration has ever looked at any potential remedies, alternatives with that space and that utilities.
So
cost.
we are actually working on something. There's one particular utility eater would be for electricity. The garage space has a couple electric heaters in there. They're electric, right? Yeah, the garages have a couple electric heaters in there. Couple of them are broke. The other two are running. They're trying to pick up the slack. So they are continuously running. I think we discussed during budget time, what we've done with City Hall is there's a grant through Eagle that's been paying for some energy improvements. We've got one last round we're gonna go through with City Hall to change out the the lighting throughout the building. And then Wes is gonna work with that grant program, see if we can get some funding to change out those electric heaters. It's probably the biggest one that we can control in terms of the utilities. I mean, the water is the water. There's not much changing that, but the electricity is one that we are kind of watching to see if we can change that a little bit through some energy optimization grants.
I definitely support making sure that we have warm cops. I'm very pro warm cop. I want that on the record, so.
Nothing worse than an angry cold cop. So, any other? Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
And just to clarify, is the increase in uniform and gear just for the anticipated being full staff?
Correct.
Cool.
Yep,
Thank
there's
you.
a cost to outfit any new employee that comes in the police department. It's their uniforms, their gear, vest, everything. And that's been accounted for in it. I think there's some extra money to start replacing some older equipment as well. But yeah, it's basically the increase of the new employees coming into the department.
Thank you.
Yep. All right, moving on to the next budget, 302 Trident. This is our Trident officer. They handle a lot of our drug cases within the city. They're part of a team. Trident is a kind of a regional team that kind of goes after some of the drug issues in the areas. There's a funding source for this. This is our officer that's dedicated to that team, so. I don't want to get into too many details of the Trident officer, but. Any questions on Trident? Alrighty. Auxiliary Police Department. So this is our auxiliary unit. These are not licensed officers. These are the volunteers that help us out with parade routes, different community event activities. You will see a pretty significant increase going from 8,600 to 8,700 up to projected at $28,900. What we increased that for was to kind of bring back parks security in the summertime. At one point, we had a dedicated park security officer. I believe it was a part-time position. That was axed a number of years ago. In working with Tyler in the Parks Department and Wes with the Auxiliary Department, we threw more money in there. We're hoping to be able to make the auxiliary program a little bit more enticing for people to come in and participate and pick up some of these hours. So we want to use them in the park to kind of drive around, have a presence, act as a security, try to minimize any vandalism. Thank you, that's the word. That wasn't quite the word I was going to use, but that's a better word. Yeah.
Would that include cameras in the parks?
Does not, and I knew you were going to bring that up, so. It's not quite in this one. So Tyler has been working with Director Twos on some camera coverage for the parks. Kirk has a need for some camera to cover his operations over at the water treatment plant. It could cover Sherman Park for us, but they've been spending the last few months going through finding different camera providers, vendors we have, and they've got kind of a plan. They're going to bid it out. Tyler's got some extra revenue from some projects that came in under budget, so we'll probably shift some of those funds to accommodate that purchase. So it's kind of what we're looking at. So we're working on it. We are working on it.
And I would support adding a wish list item for camera security for the parks.
If I plan to cover it this fiscal year, not in the next budget year, do I add that into our hit and wish? If I cover it this fiscal year,
If it's gonna get covered, if it's not gonna get covered, I'd like to make
Yeah.
sure it gets covered one way or another.
yeah. So we've got the funds, we're gonna pull it together, we're gonna
As long as it's
execute
get
on it.
covered one way or another. I just wanna make sure it gets covered.
Yeah. Nope,
Definitely.
we have heard everyone loud and clear on the cameras.
Do you want it to be on the hit and wish list, just in case?
No, I think we got it covered.
Okay.
And I'll just write a note. Make sure, Tyler, cameras. Yes, yeah, yep. And I guess just for a follow-up item too, we'll follow up with kind of the plan for the cameras. Like I said, Director Perrin and Director Two is kind of have some layout plans, what they're planning on doing. You know, give us a little bit of time, we'll have that put together and we can send that out to the commission for review too. Okay. Anything else with auxiliary? Alrighty. Moving down into Department 336, fire. So just for background, so with the fire department, we have 18 staff members and the fire chief. Their salaries and wages are broken out between two budgets. There's the fire budget, which is primarily some of the older, more senior employees, and the ambulance budget, which will follow up in a couple of funds below that. That's primarily our younger, newer guys. The progression is they come in as a firefighter paramedic, they work the ambulances a lot more than the other ones, and then they promote up to, was it driver, another operator, lieutenant, captain, chief. So it's not the totality of the fire department, this is just the fire operations. So looking down on the budget and 336 for fire. Again, no position cuts to that one. We're maintaining our 18 member staff levels, including the fire chief. Some increase in supplies, fire prevention promotional items we have included, uniforms and gears, kind of replacing out some of the older things. Hydrant rental, they do pay a fee to the water utility for use of the hydrants. Equipment repair and maintenance is the funds necessary to work on the fire trucks, the ambulance, or the fire trucks, not the ambulances.
So I was confused, so hydrant rental, like, so the fire department pays money to the water department for the hydrants?
Correct.
Okay.
Because that's an asset that's owned by the water utility, and their use of it is associated with a fee, so it's the hydrant rental.
That makes sense now.
Yeah,
Also, I think that it's interesting that the community fireworks are the fire department. I think that is fitting.
it's just because Ed loves the fireworks so much.
Fire department, that's where the fireworks are. I like that.
It's the safest spot. Uh-huh.
Figure it out.
Any major questions regarding fire? No? Okay. All right. We will move down to Department 441, operating expenses. As I was reminded earlier, this is one of our DPW functions. This covers things like sidewalks, culverts, general fund funded repairs to certain assets without the city. Again, this covers the salaries for the employees to do those certain functions. Included the budget is the fringe benefits. We got some repair and replacement in there. Equipment rental, I guess just as a note, there's line items in here that's equipment rental, internal services. The way we operate is the stock and equipment purchase, all the major equipment. That is a charge from stock and equipment to the particular department. And this one, general fund, that covers their use of those, right? I get that?
Yes, and then I would add that the personnel for the street department is submitted in whole, and then it's divided up between this local street, major street, and stock and equipment based on historical averages. So this, the wages and salaries and personnel are just part of the whole when you look at those.
Yeah. Any questions there? All right. We'll go down to engineering. Engineering, no staff cuts there. That provides for our city engineer, project administrator, staff engineer, as well as our GIS person. There is some part-time seasonal wages in there. We've been picking up the use of interns and seasonal employees throughout the summertime to help with some of the projects and processes that we have going there in that busy time. Again, you know, we get the fringe benefits in there, some dues and subscriptions, which is minor. Contracted services, you'll see an increase from 8,000 projected this year to 20,000. That's a lot of contracted services that we have that help get the projects off the ground. So any kind of survey work or GIS work that we may need done as a side part of a project, that's where those funds come from. And we all know how busy Dave is in engineering, so there's a little bit of an increase in there to $20,000. Any questions or concerns about engineering? Alrighty. Department 448, real small operating expenses for street lighting. This is all the street lights that we pay for that are Cloverland owned, but city paid for the electricity. So no major increase there. Any questions there? Good stuff. All right. 567 cemetery. Excuse me. Cemetery. We have our full-time staff that work in the cemetery as well as their supplement part-time seasonal staff. We have about $18,000 in there. Not a lot of major increases in that area, all pretty flat from year to year. So no major changes to the budget with cemetery. Any questions on cemetery? I've heard people are dying to get in there.
I just said that to Steve. But with this budget, I think we can let it rest.
Oh, you're not even a dad yet. All right. Harvey Marina, Department 592, Harvey Marina. This is the small marina over by Riverside. Not a major budget, kind of small increases, nothing major there. Any questions on Harvey? Okay. Dock, Carbide Valley, Department 593. This is the budget that funds the operations around the Carbide Dock, primarily the cruise ships that are coming in. I guess I didn't think about to mention this in revenue. We have accommodated for a decrease in the cruise ships that are coming in. Last year we topped out around, was it 60, somewhere around there? And this current summer we're anticipating, boy, a fragment of that, maybe in the 20s, somewhere around there. So we're hoping that we'll see more activity as some of the other cruise ships start coming in, but there is a decrease on some of those expenses as well as the revenue just because the number of ships have decreased. So
I am somewhat surprised to see that the repair budget for the Valley Camp didn't go up this year, given the incident that occurred. When the car hit it. With the boat. With the Valley Camp.
oh, well that's not us.
I understand.
Oh, okay.
Correct.
Okay. Ruh-roh indeed. All right. Incubator, nothing there. We'll skip that one down. Go to 595 airport. This is our airport operations. Again, for the most part, the expenses are in line with years prior. This is the budget that covers the contract service for the FBO. There is some funding in there for some small items for maintenance. But again, not a major increase in there, just kind of status quo regarding that. Any questions with the airport? All right, we'll go down to Kent Marine, another Parks Department. This includes our full-time person that oversees the Kent Marina as well as some of the other park assets. He's supplemented with part-time seasonal workers. I think it runs about 6 part-timers. About 5 part-timers. Associated benefits and taxes included in that item. Pretty much flat going across. We have some money budgeted for some repairs throughout that area. Tyler's been slowly chipping away at the docks, replacing boards, some of those other issues there, trying to make it a little bit nicer moving forward. Any questions with Kent Marina?
I do.
Yeah.
And I appreciate placemaking efforts like marinas. I think they're great resources, and so by no means I think they have to be Sullivan or even break even or anything like that. But I do notice the significant deficit in Kent Marina. Did we increase user fees at all? Do you know this year?
We did not increase the user fees this year.
Okay.
I think we did an increase
2 years ago.
2 years ago
Okay.
and an increase because it was kind of a 2-year plan. I just don't remember exactly what years it was, but there was 1 year we took a step, and there was another year that we took another step.
Now, is the Kent Marina mostly slip rentals, or does that? And I apologize because I'll be honest with you, I don't use the marina. Is there a lot of general day use, or is it mostly slip rentals, or is it like, is the public deeply involved, or is it mostly slip rentals? And maybe this is a question for Director Perrin.
So you want to head up, and I'll just kind of start. So the rental structure is established by the Michigan Waterways Commission, and they require us to have a certain amount of transient spaces within there. So anybody at any point can pull in and use it. You can kind of pick it up from there.
Yeah, that's correct. So it's roughly, I think, 60-40, seasonal versus transient slip space. And that's all dictated by the DNR. We have their reservation system in there, and that's how everything's handled there.
Okay, and do you feel like our rates are in line?
Yeah,
Okay.
we keep an eye on that with the surrounding marinas. Yep.
Okay, like,
And I guess the one thing I would say too, we started looking at Kent Marina to see where it was at, kind of in the sense of, is it plus or minus? Is it making money? Is it losing money? Part of it is that the operations for Kent Marina do kind of cross over 2 fiscal years. So, for example, we'd see a little bit more revenue coming in about this time of year that may not be in the projected, so to say. What were we saying? We talked about this a couple months ago.
We bill the marina slips in the spring
Yeah.
and for the upcoming season, but that's consistent year to year,
Yeah.
so.
So we were planning on taking a look at it, I think at the end of the calendar year, to see where it kind of came out. That way we have a full year of where the expenses and revenues are coming in at.
thank you. I just think it's important to look at those things and just be aware when there's significant deficit like that, just be aware of where we're at and
Yep.
what we're doing. So thank you.
Additionally, this is where the harbor master his full wages are charged, and he does work in other parks. So there is a little bit of that.
Any other questions on Kent Marina? All right, we'll scroll on down to Department 651 Ambulance. As I mentioned, this is the other portion of the fire department. These are a lot of our younger guys. Again, anybody that's doing ambulance-related work, this is where they are charged to. Again, for the most part, everything is pretty static. There are no staff cuts to it. Any increase in wages from year to year is based on contractual obligations or anticipated contractual obligations through the CBA. We have got budget in there for gas, oil, and grease, changing out of uniforms, contracted services. That's a big line item, and I believe that's mostly with our service through Acumed, which is the billing entity for any kind of ambulance run that we go on. And that one actually brings in a revenue because they're the ones that handles all our invoicing, so they're the ones that bring all the revenues in for us. So it's well worth the $60,000 that we pay for that service.
Brian,
Yes, ma'am.
did you want to mention there was a staff increase request?
There was a staff increase request that came through the department head. Ed was looking at doing an extra person per shift, so it'd be seven staff members. We cut that at the time, so we kept it at 6. There are some other options that Ed's looking at, and we'll kind of review it. I've kind of kept you guys in the loop on some of the issues where we have double calls, triple calls, and I think our latest and greatest is quadruple. Have we had quadruples, or is it just triples? Yeah. Yeah. So we have some concerns with that. We're trying to work it out. We're trying to figure out how we're going to handle those things. But it's kind of a future thing that we are working on. So we recognize that 6 staff members may not be the most ideal in most situations, but we'll continue to work on it. So, any questions regarding ambulance service?
Is Ed mad that we didn't give him his, or he's good? You're just looking at, you said you're looking at solutions then?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Department 701, Community Development. This is community development. It incorporates Kelly's staff, code enforcement, building inspections. No changes there. Again, staff numbers remain consistent. Not a lot of major increases in that department. Pretty static across the board. So, and I guess just as a tie-on, the next one, Department 702, is zoning. The changes in our, what is it called? State
Chart of accounts.
State
very
chart of
good.
accounts required us to split out the zoning function from community development. So for the most part, the monies that are budgeted within the zoning are strictly for zoning activities. So the travel and training is actually for the ZBA or the plan commission members to go to certain trainings, printing advertisings, any kind of required notices that Mr. Freeman may have to do for any ordinance updates, as well as the associated postage. So nothing major in there as well. Any questions or concerns, community development or zoning? All right. EDC, chart of accounts, was an update, so we can skip over this section. We didn't axe the EDC, though that's what it looks like, but that's not the case. They're just in a different fund on a different page. So we'll skip that down. We'll go to Department 775 and on Osborne. On Osborne, again, this is, there's some salaries included in there for the person that oversees the campground. She also oversees or assists Tyler in some of their operations, the Polar being one of them. In the wintertime, we do have part-time seasonal help that helps cover the hours of operation throughout the week. Not really included in this, we also have an arrangement with a camper that acts as our host for the area, so any kind of visitor that comes in outside of our normal office hours, they're their point of contact. They tell them where to go, they set them up, answer any questions they have. So we've been doing that about 2 summers now. Oh, maybe a little bit longer, 3 or 4 now, but it's worked out really well. It's worked out very well with us. So again, no major increases to that. Dues and subscriptions is kind of a high dollar amount. That's our use of the state reservation, or no, not the state. It's our reservation system, but it's not the state.
My site's online reservations.
My Site's online reservations. Any questions or concerns regarding the campground?
Just a comment, because I commented the other way on another service, but I'm just really pleased at how well this particular budget item does within our system, so.
Yep, it
Well
brings
done.
in a good amount of money for
Well
us. It certainly covers us. All right, if there's no other questions on that, we'll go down to Department 776, Parks Maintenance. This is the general fund share, well, they're all general fund, but this is more of the summer activities with the parks crews. So when we're out mowing the lawns, taking care of the garbages, anything related to parks. Again, no staff cuts there. We have 6 parks employees. They're still fully funded. You can see in there some of the operating expenses. We have contracted services, just kind of point that out because that's high. Contracted services include the county jail services for their inmates to come. You'll see them weed whipping and doing some other work for us. Does that include the other contracted service we have too? Yeah, and then we have another operating, or not an operating, we have another contract with the ISD for some more summer support for their students to get some job experience and work within our park system as well. So that's included in there. Any questions on parks maintenance? Brian's really upset about parks. All right, if there's no questions, park maintenance, we'll go down to Department 777, Polar. This funds the operations for the Polar. If you're not aware, our staff in the Parks Department, they get moved around twice a year. They go from the summer activities, which would be parks maintenance, to the Polar, excuse me. Excuse me. Our full-timers get shifted down to the Polar. Excuse me. Polar, other half of our part staff move down there in the wintertime. For the most part, not a lot of major increases in there. Utilities are high. We do look at operations to try to minimize those, just kind of going off the comment about the police department. We have a couple of projects that we're looking at that could reduce it. We're not anticipating a huge saving, but it could reduce a little bit, so. Any questions regarding Polar?
Just a comment again. Again, this area sees a significant difference between revenue and expenses. And again, high utility costs is part of that. And again, as you mentioned, there is a big difference when some of those workers are spending a large part of their working not only in Polar, but they're heading to parks in the summertime and whatnot. But I appreciated the city's effort to increase revenue throughout the past year with some new efforts. And I would just encourage, I think that park area in particular has a great opportunity to continue to increase revenue. And I would encourage city administration to continue to work on increasing revenue specifically within that park. I'd love to see a plan to continue to increase revenue there and how we can continue to just grow revenues within that park so that that deficit can continue to just be reduced and that can be more just less of a burden upon the budget. But I do think that community building is an important part, and so whatever we can do to kind of bring that more in line, I think is important.
Okay. All right, good comment?
I noticed there's not a line item for the hood, but that's a separate issue, right?
It's a capital budget, yes.
Oh, I see.
That is not included in operations. Thank you. All right, we'll hop down to Department 779, Sioux Seal Recreational Area. This is our ski and sled hill, mostly staffed by part-timers during the winter months. Obviously, you can see this year we're projecting not a lot of activities because we didn't have a lot of activities. So This year is kind of an anomaly. We are anticipating a normal winter, so we built the budget based on that. Again, for the most part, with the anomaly of this year, the budget's pretty consistent, with not a lot of major increases from 2 years ago to next fiscal year. Any questions on the rec area, Sioux City rec area? All right. We'll move down to Department 780, beautification. This is just a small budget, pays for a part-timer to come in, help with some of the gardens through the downtown along the business spur. There's some funds for the supplies to purchase the flowers. It's a small budget, but an important budget, so. Any questions regarding beautification? All righty, good stuff. We'll move down to Department 804, historic homes. Historic homes are the 4 homes over on Water Street. The commission will recall we brought that in not that long ago. There's funding in there for part-time seasonal staff, which are the docents, which helps maintain or helps operate the homes for us. We do have some funds in there for brochures and exhibits, as well as some maintenance activity around the homes. So there's no major capital included in this that would be in a capital budget. We'll get in that in a couple pages here. So this is solely operations for the historic homes. Any question on historic homes? All right. 902, capital equipment. These are just the transfers from the general fund to the project line items. We'll get more into detail on some of these in the next couple of pages when we start reviewing capital equipment. Department 905, debt service. That's just an old one, nothing much there. Department 965, transfers out. These are monies that are transferred out from the general fund to the respective categories. So you'll see that there's 237 budgeted for transfer out for debt service, and I believe that's the debt service for
This building?
this building. That's what I thought. So, and we got a couple more years on that one. How much more do we got in that?
Yeah, 2026, I think.
Yeah,
I
a
think
couple
was
more years.
refunded in 2016.
$190,000 being transferred out for capital projects, and then as well as a transfer out to stock and equipment. Stock and equipment is a standalone fund, but there are times where we have to support it with the general fund. Historically, it hasn't been a lot. This year, you'll see that there is an increase anticipated for the projected activity, a little bit higher than what we normally see. A lot of that is just because we didn't have a very busy winter, and we had to fund some of the operations through stock and equipment, so general fund makes it whole, more or less. Any questions on transfer outs? All right, so that's kind of the general fund. Any questions on general fund operations before we go into a little bit more information? Alrighty. So if you guys want to skip over page 21 and go to what would be 22, this is our fund balance sheet that shows where we're at with our general fund balance. Our general policy that we have in place is 25%. You want to walk us through this, Kristen?
Okay, the policy is to stay within 15 to 20% of the expenditures. So this calculation is just showing the math. The yellow column is where we project to be with a fund balance of 32.49% at the end of this current year, which is great. It's well above our minimum. And of course, a healthy fund balance is something that we would want to maintain. And I'll get into that in just a moment. If you look at year 2, we're looking at 31%, and then, I'm sorry, next year, and then another 31% for the second budget year. At the bottom, we've added this for the commission's review. If we were to decrease the fund balance to 25% and set aside something in reserve for future capital equipment. And this would maybe defer costs for some kind of capital equipment that we would either need or some kind of a emergency purchase, or possibly just things that we would maybe otherwise have to borrow for. So we did the math at 25%, and if you look across at the very bottom row, you see that it's roughly around $1 million that we could set aside at this time and still have a 25% even at the end of year 2. So this is something for the commission's consideration, and we did think that it would be a good time to point that out while we're looking at fund balance ratio.
And part of that will play into the conversation that we're about to have regarding capital projects and equipment. You'll see we had a lot of requests. A lot of them are high dollar amounts. So in my opinion, it would behoove us to kind of have this money kind of set aside for any kind of major capital purchase that we have to go forward to. So any other general thoughts or comments regarding that?
Isn't there a second fund balance ratio we tracked it?
Yeah, we decided for simplicity, since we were adding to this formula, to just remove that for now. It has to do with removing the compensated absences. So it's just kind of another gyration of it. So it's not shown here today, but we still have it, and it's still within the acceptable range.
Policy I think we created, so
Mhm.
we need to change the policy then.
We could. We can update that policy anytime you wish.
And we can update that form. We can put that information back in there and share it with the commission. Any
Uh,
question on general fund?
Yeah, I just have a question. When we look at that fund balance ratio, so our policy is 15 to 20%, correct? What is recommended by our auditors on amount? Do we have an amount? Or a
They-
percentage, I'm sorry.
They're reluctant to give us a set percentage. It varies so much based on the location and the way things run. But they have given us a very high report, a score, if you will. When they presented their audit last year, they gave us a very high score.
Yeah.
They said it was fiscally prudent to maintain that fund balance. But setting aside in reserves is not a negative. It's still there. It's just that you set it aside with that thought in mind, and it's a sole discretion of the commission to use it for whatever purpose. So you could set it aside, and then if we had a hard year next year, you could take it back out of reserve.
But I would say 15 to 20% is pretty good fund balance. There isn't a blanket answer for that, because like Director Collins said, it kind of depends on the local situations. If you look at communities that are further south, like in Florida, they usually have a much higher fund balance in case they have like a major storm come in and they got to make some repairs. So it all really just kind of depends, but I would say 15 to 20% is usually a pretty good fund balance.
So I guess my question then would be, we calculated a 25% projection. What about a 20% projection? Or a 15% projection? Are those projections we could also see?
I mean, we could do that. We could run that analysis so the commission can see. I think 25%, in our discussions, I think 25% would be good, because there's kind of the fund balance that you want to have and hold on to, but then there's some wiggle room within the budget as you move forward. So I mean, 25% estimated, could be a little bit lower if we did what we planned on doing and ran through the budget. Some things could come up higher. So I mean, the 25 is a good base, but if the commission wanted to, we could run the analysis at 25, 20, 15%.
It's just semantics, really. I mean, let's just look at the projects that you want to do and
Yeah.
see where we end up with the ratio. So.
We could certainly revisit the fund balance policy at some point and get some recommendations from our auditors as well.
Yeah, I think it's the bond rating companies you really want to look at, not the auditors.
And we'll be getting that feedback soon for the sewer and water fund, but they do kind of take into account the city as a whole as well. So we'll hear back on that. We haven't borrowed in so long that we don't have a lot of feedback on that right now.
Okay. Any other questions or conversations regarding fund balance? Excuse me. All right. Flipping into the next section, capital projects and equipment. So this is probably the harder part of the budget. The operations are the operations, but we have a lot of requests and we have a lot of needs within the organization, and it's kind of a tough balancing act to go through these. Staff does a great job in working through this process. We prioritize some of these things. One thing to note, anything that's highlighted in yellow is a reserve that we're going to build up over time in order to fund some of these things. Again, what we did was our assumption, we didn't even really look at any kind of general fund reserve from the fund balance. These are just the cash amount that we had within the budget. So certain items we're planning out multiple years. Just kind of going through the list really quick, you'll see year one department request, what my recommendation is in the orange, and then again, the 2 green columns. So starting off with fire, we had an ambulance, that one got scratched out. We had Lucas, external cardiac compression devices, ambulance power cot. There was a request for some more, but we're gonna budget for 1. That's really kind of a workers' comp and safety issue for the staff. That's a machine that'll actually lift up the bed. Ed had to do it a little bit over the weekend, and he said the cot is definitely needed. Yeah, you didn't hear me. All right. DPW equipment, single axle plow truck with wing, new leafer. Leafer we have is currently outdated. There's a more efficient one on the market that we'd like to go after that one. Production mowers, the parks department. Motor grader with a wing for DPW for street plowing. Zamboni, building out a reserve for new Zamboni within the Polar. Speed trailer and signs, we're putting $25,000 on the side for that. That could be the actual trailer that we pull around to certain locations. We've also talked about the signs that you would see on the edge of town that actually flash how fast you're going. We'll kind of
On
make
the
it.
Zamboni, are we able to sell the old Zamboni, and I mean, is there really a market for that, or not really? Okay.
Yeah, we have 2 Zambonis right now. One has been cannibalized for parts for the most part. And the other one that's running in the Polar, there's some issues with it. So we'll get a new one, we'll sell off the older one and put the other one in reserve.
And just for clarification, the budget shows that we cut the Zamboni and that we've put 50,000 in reserve to purchase it in a couple of years.
Yeah,
And the same with the motor grader and the ambulance.
yes,
Okay.
yep. A couple of pieces of equipment for engineering department, wide format plotter. That's a piece of equipment that'll make them a little bit more effective. Big one for the fire department is upgrading their radios. We're gonna budget out 6 new radios per year. The fire department's operating under an older radio system. There's not a lot of interoperability between fire department, any of the law enforcement agencies in here. They don't have the best reception. We had an opportunity a long time ago to upgrade, but at the time, we just chose not to.
Ed, do you chase AFG grants for that? Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So there's some of these things that we're budgeting for that we feel we do need to make movement on, but there are some grants out there that we have applied for, we plan on applying for. If the grant picks them up, awesome. We don't have to use those funds. We can put it somewhere else. Otherwise, we have the money at least in the background that we can pull from to make those purchases. But Ed does a pretty good job at chasing grants, so. One thing that's kind of sticks out from the fire department, there's a request for the fire pumper. The current pumper that we have is coming up at the end of its useful life. There's a lot of maintenance issues with it. There's issues with the tank that it currently holds. So we have to start to put together a plan on the fire pumper. Ed's been working on it since he's been up here. The problem with the fire pumpers is they're 4 to 5 years out before they're finalized. Costs can go up. They're kind of hard to predict. So there are some other options. We're going to try to make ourselves as flexible as possible. If there's a pumper that's being made somewhere else and it'll fit our needs, we could buy it for a little bit cheaper or at least lock in the price if somebody else cancels their order. So we're going to start stocking some money away from that one. and try to make that purchase coming up in the future. SCBA's was the air cylinders for the fire department. We need to maintain those. There's a useful life on them. Fire command vehicle, new one for Ed theirs is falling apart. High pressure extrication tools, $30,000. Computer replacement, this is for Bonnie, get some new computers in the organization. In-body camera interview and in-car and body cameras, $40,000. This is part of a multi-year project. We'll have some money set aside to replace the body cameras they wear, the cameras in their vehicle, as well as the cameras in the interview rooms. There's some issues with them now. They're a little bit older, so we'd like to start putting a plan together to replace those. Police detective vehicles, replacing one of those at $45,000 next fiscal year. Police patrol vehicles, no request for this current year, but looking out ahead with one request for one of them. Get into water and sewer activities, flatbed utility truck for the water sewer equipment operations, water treatment switch replacement, $100,000, flash mixer replacement, $75,000, a steam trailer to help unthaw some of the issues we have in the wintertime, hydraulic dump trailer, next year, lift station pump check and valve replacements, Park Place muffin monster replacement, $25,000. There's some Associated Airport things that we cut, didn't move forward with this year. What else? Crushing and millings is an annual thing we've been doing with a lot of the construction projects that we've been going on. We've been piling up the broken concrete, we grind them up, we use them elsewhere in the city, so it's actually been kind of a cost savings for us. Historic homes, budget in there for there about $15,000, do some roof work to maintain those assets so we don't lose them. Aerial orthography, essentially a new picture of the city to use on our GIS system. The one we currently have is pretty old and outdated. That'll get us a new base layer. Fire hall roof replacement. There's been some leaks in the fire department, and we don't want to ruin any of the investments we've currently made in there, so we got $75,000 for that. Similar to what we did with the fire department, we're looking at updating the women's locker room, the police department. There's the chance, and we've seen an increase in female applicants in the police department. We want to make sure they have the facilities that they need as well. West 25th Avenue sewer main lining project, $500,000 to get that done. Manhole structure lining project, $50,000. These two projects will be critical for us in reducing the amount of clear water that comes into the system. Radar tank cleaning mixer install, $50,000. All in all, it's about 2,000, that's wrong too, $2,506,000 in capital that we're anticipating for the next year. Going down the page, you can see all the different funding sources between, or different departments between police, fire, sewer, wastewater treatment plant, as well as the funds that some of these will come from, whether it be a general fund, water, sewer capital, or whatever the case may be, so. Any questions or comments or anything on the capital equipment list? Yes.
How much worse can that Sherman Park erosion get if nothing is done?
So actually, we've been talking about that quite a bit. At this current time, I would say it can't get much worse, only for the simple fact that the water is really low. And so there's not as much wave break action in that area. So we did talk about that. We are looking at going in on a grant through EPA. There's a grant through the EPA that's kind of being a regional initiative, and they'll fund the restoration of any green infrastructure, climate resiliency, and what other hot buzzwords that are kind of out there right now. So we've got some grants out there that we're looking at. I think there's some more opportunities that we could research. But we felt when we were going through the cuts that because the water is lower than what it had been, there won't be as much breaking action. It won't be as bad in the future. So we are holding off on that. Hopefully one of these grants will come through and we'll be able to rehab some of that.
Thank you.
Much like the marina, I don't spend a lot of time at the ball fields, but one of the concerns that has been brought to my attention is that there's some safety concerns regarding the fencing and the bleachers at Malcolm Park. I'm just wondering if you can address that. I noticed that those projects were requested by the department but not addressed, and just wondering if that's a safety concern, and if so, should that be addressed? Thank you.
I don't know if I'd necessarily say it's a safety concern. I mean, it's an aesthetic concern.
We've been repairing some as we can. There's actually a couple sets of bleachers at Mon Park that are only used a handful of times. We're actually using 2 ball fields where the worst ones are for now.
Is the fencing a concern at all? I've heard concerns about it curling up. You know,
There's some frosting damage and some fencing, yes. We're looking at possibly trying to remedy some of that in-house with staff. What we can. We do have cost estimates on it. Our contractor will be there.
Any other questions? And I think we just got is the Spark grant, right? Yeah, we just got the notice end of last week or maybe earlier. End of last week. We didn't get the grant, so. Yeah.
But when you go through these cuts, you understand what we were talking about earlier about reserving from the general fund for
Yeah.
some of this important equipment that we just can't afford in 1 year. So if the commission chooses to go that route, we can do that.
I'm just concerned with, I mean, if we can handle it in-house, great, but I'm concerned, we've got small children up there playing, we got kids up there, and if fencing is an issue and we've got kids up there playing, I don't want that to be a concern where we put the city at risk and liable for any kids getting hurt.
Right. Any other questions or comments or concerns regarding the capital equipment? You guys need a 5-minute break or anything like that before we move on to the next big budget? No? Roll through it, Jay? All right. Okay.
2 minutes.
Yeah. We'll take a hot 2-minute break.
2 minutes.
Setting it aside or just keeping it in general? Because then you're.
Major streets coming in about, looking at projected for next year, $1.9 million. So kind of going down into the operations again, not a lot of major structural changes. There were no staff cuts to there. There was no staff enhancements. Everything for the most part is status quo. Any increases in salaries or benefits, again, are either anticipated CBA obligations or current CBA obligations, so. And I guess just to kind of hammer it a little bit more too, I mean, you'll see the line items are broken out. Traffic signal maintenance, pavement markings, bridge maintenance, guardrails, a lot of different activities that we have within these budgets, so. Any major questions or any concerns regarding the major streets?
Just one question. Do we only do bridge maintenance on a schedule? Just, it wasn't in there before and now it's in there. Is that a scheduled maintenance operation?
That was it was covered under the larger name of contract services. It was broken out.
Okay.
So we could track that.
Okay, thank you.
I believe we do biannual inspections and always have, right, Dave? And then we have a capital project and that's coming up for a more thorough review.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
But of the, what do we have, 5 bridges in town? 7, sorry, 7, and all 7 are owned by the city, correct? Or 6? Yeah, so we have 5, we own 5 of the 7. That's what it is. Any questions regarding major? All right, we'll scroll through there, go down to Fund 203, Local Street. Again, handful of revenue sources that are coming in for local streets. Act 51, big contributor to these funds. There is some money that transfers in and out between major street. They kind of help each other out. If one's fallen short, there's some transfers that come in from the other one. Regarding operating expenses, again, these are portions of the employees that we currently have based on the function that they're doing on that particular day where they're located at. These are where it gets charged out to. Anything major on local street? Okay. We will scroll down to 661, stock and equipment. Stock and equipment, again, this is kind of the catch-all for a lot of DPW operations. This is the fund that buys most of the equipment. You'll see in the revenues, equipment rental. So if there's a vehicle that's purchased for a different department, it gets charged back to this one as a revenue coming back in. There's some other revenues coming in there. General fund, like I said, there's transfers from general fund in that kind of makes this whole and balanced moving forward. That kind of depends on the year that we currently have. For the most part, revenues are pretty static moving forward. Operation-wise, within the expenditures, again, pretty static moving forward. Not a lot of major changes.
If you'll notice, the current year, because of the light winter, the salaries and wages are quite a bit higher. And that was what the manager was talking about earlier.
Yep. We gotta charge them somewhere, and if they're not actually doing the work on a major or a local, this is kind of where they fall into. So as they weren't plowing out in the winter time, they were doing other activities, that's where they were charged to in stock and equipment, so. Just going back to the back page, you'll see some more costs in there. We have a couple of debt services for this one. I think these were, their equipment installment purchases. I believe they were graders at the time.
A grader and a loader.
Grader and a loader. The greatest grader and the loader. Any questions or anything with stacking equipment?
Do we know how long is left on those debt services? Offhand, that's all right.
I think we did in about 2020, maybe 2021.
It might have been 7-year. I can't remember. I can follow up.
Yeah.
Okay. Callie's going to pull up the schedule. November 2026, it's paid off. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments or anything regarding stacking equipment? Okay. All right, we'll get to the next big one. So water and sewer, again, just as background information, water and sewer are enterprise funds. They are operated on the revenues they bring in and the expenses that they expense out. They kind of have to equate. They're separate from the general fund. They have their own staff that is billed out to these different departments. Sewer and water, we have little mini funds that are kind of built down there, and then we have sewer capital reserves as well as water capital reserves. So we have the more important sheets kind of in a couple of pages here, but for the most part, sewer and water starting off on page 38, you see the revenues that we anticipate coming in for the next year. We are seeing a little bit increase in some of the user fees that are coming in. A lot of it's based on the new meters that we have in the system. We'll show you the usage graph in a little bit. You'll see that there's kind of a spike in there. But for the most part, these are the revenues that fund the operations between water and sewer. And water and sewer includes the water treatment plant, wastewater treatment plant, the distribution and collection system, lift stations, pump houses, muffin munchers, all that fun stuff. So we will, that's the revenues going into the appropriations, the expenditure side of things. Again, we have them kind of broken out. This first one is staff support for water. This is Director 2's wages, and does this include a part of Gen 2? And a part of the utility billing clerk that we have downstairs. She's broken out. She was general fund at one point, but we pulled her out and split her up between water and sewer funds. So this is the staff support. Again, this is Director 2's. There are some other line items in here. Nothing major increasing, pretty status quo moving forward. Staff support, sewer, that would be that other portion of the utility billing clerk's wages. Going down into Department 539, water filtration plant. That is our 6 staff members, the water treatment plant. No major changes there. Staff numbers maintained, no cuts, no enhancements. This one is the true cost of operating the water filtration plant, so that covers our staff, the chemicals, the utilities to run the plant. We have travel and training there for everybody to maintain their licenses per the state. Any major questions or anything so far? Going down to transmission and distribution, Department 540. This is the cost for our distribution system. There's the staff members that are housed over near DPW. They're the ones that go out and fix the fire hydrants, do all the underground work regarding water and sewer distribution and collection systems. Again, staff numbers maintain there. Any increases is based on CVA obligations. Not a lot of major increases in there. For the most part, holding kind of steady. Operating meters, Department 542, This is the budget for the one operator, or the one meter operator that we have. They're the person that goes around, replaces or works on the meters. For the most part, pretty static there. Again, no major increases. I think that's one staff person, right, Kirk? Yeah, one staff person. Department 544 sewer system. That is, remind me what 544 is again, sewer system.
The sewer lines that run through the
That's right.
city.
That's right. So it's all the sewer collection systems. Pretty status quo. Nothing major there. Sewage treatment plants, the wastewater treatment plant. Salaries include the 5 staff members as well as Mr. Masterson. No reductions or enhancements there. This is the operating cost of the wastewater treatment plant. Includes all of our lab work, any chemicals that we do have, repair and maintenance activities. Any questions on the wastewater treatment plant at this time? Not going too fast, am I? Just the right speed, all right. Lift station, so we did break this one out a couple years ago. This used to be part of the wastewater treatment plant, but we wanted to have a better handle on the cost for the lift stations. We have 5 or 6 lift stations? 9. Boy, I'm off. We have 9 lift stations throughout the city. Again, if you don't know, that's the collection system where there may be a low point. They lift it up to get it to the next section on its way into the treatment plant. We started tracking these a couple of years ago, just gonna get a better handle on them. You'll see there was an increase last couple of years. It is kind of going down a little bit. We did do a lot of maintenance activities within the lift stations. I know it's been a pretty big priority of Brian's is getting those things up to snuff to where they should be, so. No major adjustments moving forward on that one. Capital equipment, that just shows the breakout of the capital costs and the projects. We'll kind of get into that a little bit more. The next section, Department 905. This is the list of the principal and interest payments that we make on the variety of different loans and bonds that we currently have out for the system. You'll kind of see a couple of them dropping off in the next couple of years. I think we have scheduled out more to fall off in a couple of years after this. They're just not on the page, but I think there's a significant reduction soon, right?
We just paid, this month, we paid 913 and 914, so those top 2 on the list.
Yep.
Is there ever gonna be a day when we're gonna be done with CSO?
Well, we will be done with CSOs soon. We are under obligation with our NPDES permit for the wastewater treatment plant. We were supposed to have them done prior to this, but for whatever reason, they just didn't move forward on it. We got a lot of new staff around the table. Eagle gave us some more time. We've made a lot of progress in at least getting the plans and the projects rolling with funding, design, and all that stuff. We probably won't meet our drop dead deadline in the NPDES, but we've made enough progress. We meet with Eagle quarterly on just this topic. We will probably be able to buy ourselves some more time within the next permit. We've got to wrap out a couple more CSO projects, and then what we have to do is a project certification required in our NPDES, which basically shows that the work we've done since the early 90s all the way up until this point can handle a 100-year rains event, 24-hour, 100-year rainstorm, right? That's the threshold. And so there's some other engineering work that we'll have to do when we get to that point. They'll make a model, they'll show everything. And as long as we can show that we handle that type of event, then we'll be cleared of the CSO. That doesn't mean we're done doing our work, though. I mean, there will always be projects, there will always be improvements or replacements that we have to do. So there will always be some form of debt. A lot of it is based on CSO work, but in the future, it'll just be debt, not necessarily tied to CSO. It's just improvements that we'll have to make throughout the system.
So the answer is no.
No. Well, I guess with your question was, will we be done with CSOs? Yes, we'll be done with CSOs. Will we ever be done borrowing and working on the system? No. We'll never be done doing that, especially our system. Our system's a little bit under-maintained, so to say. I mean, there's a lot of older infrastructure under the ground. There's a lot of work to do, but we are focusing on the bigger items that we're either obligated to per our NPDES permit, or what we consider to be kind of a critical project that we have to move forward with. But we've got them all in the works. I mean, we've found some different funding sources. Part of the CWSRF that we discussed a few meetings ago, that's going to close out the Peck and Eureka area. That is an open CSO. That one will be done. We're working with the Army Corps of Engineers on the Water Street CSO. That one should be done in a couple of years. And I think those are the big two ones, mixed with the repair, or the major upgrades to the wastewater treatment plant. Those three things should get us over our project certification.
But if you look at it long-term, our water system and our sewer system, so excluding the plants, we have roughly $68 million worth of infrastructure in those, and that's just our records, so that's, you know, since GASB, whatever, when we started calculating it. And only about 24 million is depreciated. So, I mean, we really have a huge asset there, so yeah, we'll be maintaining that asset forever.
But huge assets are huge liabilities.
True.
So, did I answer your question?
Yeah, I guess.
Plus some.
Just remember, yeah.
All right, so that's the debt schedule. You see some transfers out for some projects. Kind of getting to what's the meat and potatoes, and really what the commission usually looks for in terms of this. So our revenues and our expenditures, the question is, what are the rates going to be? So we have for you the next couple of pages are the is what we anticipate, or what we're proposing to be the rate structure. And for the most part, we're looking at an average about a 2% increase for utility services. So we've been slowly increasing them over a year. The 2% will cover our capital costs, our operating costs, as well as putting some money into the reserves just in case for projects moving forward. So 2% is a pretty average increase. It's not terrible. The first page here, page 46, kind of shows you the breakdown of what the rates are based on meter side, whether they're meter size, whether they're in the city, whether or not. It shows the commodity charge, as well as the sewer rates kind of in that same structure. So again, at the bottom of the page, kind of what we really want to hit on is that we're proposing basically a 2%, I keep saying wage increase, 2% rate increase based on your average use of about 500,000 gallons. So you'll, go ahead, sorry.
5,000,
What did I say?
a little higher.
Oh,
Thinking big tonight.
Yeah.
jeez, Pete's. Super tongue-tied. All right. Off my flow. Where am I at now? All right, so page 46. Page 47 shows you the breakdown of what the water and sewer rates are within the city, as well as the third column there shows you what the combined rates are. So what your average user, based on how many gallons of water they would use per month, would be charged there. So on average, it's about 5,000 gallons per month, and just under a 2% increase there. And, go ahead.
Yeah, just a quick question. You mentioned earlier when we were talking about fund balance and using it to, either setting it aside to fund capital projects. What about using it to reduce debt service? Is that an option at all?
Kristen, you want to comment on that?
Our debt is on a 20-year amortization schedule, and there are windows for having them callable. And so we'd have to check into that, but most of our debt is fairly reasonable rates. So I'd be kind of surprised if it were me and I was, kind of deciding between prepaying debt or setting aside for future obligations. I think I'd want to set aside, especially at today's investment returns.
Thank you.
So one other thing that we like to point out on page 48 is our historical water usage. And again, this is important because our operations are fixed operations. We can't take collection systems or water distribution systems. We can't shrink the plants down. Our costs are fixed to provide those services. So when it's based on the usage within the community and you've seen a downward trend on those usages, yeah, obviously there's going to be some rate adjustments there. But you would see that there is an uptick kind of near the end there on the right side of the graph, and we're assuming that part of that is the new meters that we put in place. They're a little bit more accurate. They actually read the water that's flowing into the structures. So we got a little bit increase, but between more water efficient toilets and sinks and showers and everything else, there's a steady decline in the water usage within our system. And it's not like, Kirk and I always kind of joked about this, it's not like the electrical company where if you put in a light bulb that's going to lower your usage, you're also plugging in probably 3 or 4 or 5 other devices that's going to offset that usage. So still have an increase there. We don't have anything like that. So we see a decrease. Kirk talked about having people put on more sprinklers, but we know they won't fool or fall for that. So any question, Chris and Kelly, any comments? Oh, sorry.
If you go out further back than '04, is it the same trend? Or has it ebbed and flowed?
1.03% long-term historical is the loss each year. I think I meant 3%. I'm confused. I'm not sure, but
Yes.
it's a
Yes, there's
3%
been a
loss, I believe.
long-term
Very long-term, going back before '04.
Any, Chris and Kelly, anything else you guys want to mention on it that maybe I didn't touch on? Okay. Anything else from the commission side regarding water and sewer?
Just certainly 2%, I know is an increase, but that's a very reasonable, small, digestible increase. I know other communities who don't necessarily increase it as diligently that have to face significant increases.
Right.
And so I know that it's not fun to increase it, but it's so much easier to do it small and reasonable, digestible, as opposed to 30%, 40%, 60%. You know,
And I think the organization, the commission, the staff, the people before us, I think there's been some responsible actions taken to make sure that there's some increases. And that's kind of what we feel is 2% is reasonable, it's palatable, and it gets us to where we need to be long-term without a 30, 40, 50% increase like some of the smaller communities do. So. Anything else, water, sewer? Love it. All right. Keep it rolling, Jody says. Page 49, went over that. Sewer capital reserves. They just show the reserves that we're building into the fund, the funds. Kind of talked about that a little bit already. See you guys. Hope there's no questions. Yeah. Sewer capital reserve, water capital reserve, we kind of touched on these. Again, the rates are built in to put enough money into the reserves. It covers us if we have any kind of major emergencies or anything like that, so. Anything else? All right, we'll keep rolling. We'll get into page 52. Next couple of sections here, EDC fund, TIFA fund, airport, TIFA 1, TIFA 2, downtown tax capture. Oops, excuse me. All right, so rolling into page 53 is the EDC fund. As I mentioned, we didn't cut it out of the general fund. It just got shuffled into a different fund. EDC fund, you'll see the anticipated revenues coming in for there. Not a whole lot. There are some major or not major revenues, but we got the industrial incubator rental income. That's a big source for them. The tenant utility reimbursement for the Easter Day incubator. Transfer in from TIFA 3 for some of the work around the airports, but nothing major there. So appropriations kind of moving down there. You see there's no major changes to those services for the incubator and industrial park. Basically some contract services for plowing, grass mowing, things of that nature. The utilities, again, nothing major there. And then we'll scroll down to the EDC operating fund. We have the one staff position that we currently have in there right now. Their salaries, their benefits moving down there. Computer services that gets charged back for being part of the IT system within the organization. Some small contracted services, nothing major there. So EDC ends with about $120,000 expenditures. They do have fund balance there. I think they're coming out kind of pretty close to where they're not eating up too much of their fund balance. So, any questions on the EDC? All right. Move on to TIFA 3. TIFA 3 is the tax increment area up by the airport. Just as a side note, TIFA 3 is currently scheduled to expire, I think, the end of 2026, right? End of 2026. Within this budget, you can see the tax capture is coming in anticipated. $119,000, personal property tax loss reimbursement, interest earnings $14,000. So revenues coming in about $222,000. No major expenses right now. There's some transfers coming out of the TIFA, $70,000. That's to support the airport and the general fund line items. Transfer out to EDC for some of their management services that's within their TIF capture plan. And nothing major for the next year for capital projects. Any questions on TIFA 3? All right. We'll move down to Fund 248, which is the DDA fund. Included in the budget is the list of their expected revenues moving forward. They have a special assessment within the district to fund some of their operations. We usually anticipate some match on main programs. It's not necessarily revenue producing. There's an offset of a grant expenditure with that. So 50,000 is usually what we get. We anticipate spending out the 50,000, but if we don't get awarded anything, then the expenditures go down, and it's kind of it's a zero, net zero. There's some donations that are coming in for some of their events. If you guys recall, DDA kind of went through and picked out what events they really want to focus on this year. So there's some events budgeted for this year, Amusing the Park being one of them, New Year's Eve, Halloween Spooktacular, Parade of Lights, as well as their movie series. Other than that, they don't have a whole lot of extra revenues coming in. Going down to the appropriation side of it, we have the current employee that's currently employed at about $60,000 or $18,000. Sorry, that's the part-time person. Again, we have a contingency set up to kind of figure out what we're going to do moving forward. So there isn't an executive director budgeted for it at that time. If we add it back in, we can add it back in at a later date. Going down the list is their schedule of expenditures. Again, a lot of this is kind of one-offs. So if they have revenue coming in for an event, they have an expenditure going out for the said event. There's some expenses associated with sidewalk plowing. That's that annual contract that we do for some of the sidewalk clearing in the downtown. Computer services, again, being part of the organization, they pay for their fair share of services. Again, the events, some marketing, design expenses, a little bit of travel and training, but nothing too much. Anything major with the,
I do. I can't agree with not budgeting for a position that we currently have on our books. And I understand that you put it in the contingency, but I think that we absolutely need to budget for a DDA director. We have it on our books. It is in there. This commission has not decided not to have a DDA director or an EDC director, or combine that position at this current time. And if we choose to, at that time, we can do a budget amendment at that time. But until then, I think that position should be absolutely 100% within the budget and funded. And again, I understand it's a contingency. I understand that you have it at that point, but currently that position is on the books. Currently, at any point, that DDA board could decide that they want to post that position, and if so, it would be posted, and if there's no budget, I think it needs to be budgeted. I firmly believe that that position should be budgeted for.
So we've recorded this as our first wish, and we'll put that in, and then it will be voted on at the special meeting. Correct?
are you gonna add that back? Any other questions or comments regarding the DDA budget? Yeah.
I guess my opinion on that, we have both boards, I think, that have voted and expressed that they want to explore a joint option. We have the contingency should that break down, so I guess my view on it is we're already kind of headed in one direction. I just don't see I just don't see it necessary to add it back in. It kind of comes down to semantics, it seems like.
I agree with you. They're both component units of the city, so we're not responsible actually to even fund those. So if they decide that they want to add them, they're going to have to come up with the budgetary, not out of the city's budget.
So I guess,
They're independent boards. Well, it's going to have to come out of EDC reserves or DDA. I don't know where they would come up with it.
and that's what, so both the DDA and the EDC, not so much the EDC, but like, for example, the DDA, they don't bring in the revenues to support their own positions. So to add that back in, and again, that's why there's a contingency in the general fund, that would come from the general fund, there would be a greater appropriation that comes in from the general fund to fund it. So, I mean, I guess just going off of the way we've typically done it, I mean, Commissioner Busta made a wish. We can run through that analysis. And I guess, you know, I guess I'd propose the commission, you could maybe settle the wish at the conclusion of this, or we can do the meeting next Monday. And maybe that's a point of conversation to have once we get through the last couple of budgets here. If that's acceptable to the commission.
That's fine.
Okay.
The cost of it is laid out already for you, though, just for your own review. It's in the department requested, so if you look at that, you can kind of see the difference.
All right, so that's the DDA. Are there any other questions, comments, anything regarding DDA? Okay. DDA is supported by TIFA 1 fund. That's on page 59. Again, this shows you your revenues coming in off that tax capture, roughly $250,000. Transfer out of $250,000 to the park and deck. So, I mean, that's part of the challenges with the DDA and their TIFAs, is that at one point there was a desire to have the parking garage, which was bonded out, and at a certain point, usually after the recession, is when the tax values kind of drop down, so the revenue collections kind of drop down too. So,
And what year is that off that service?
November 2026.
Yep.
couple more years. So, any questions with TIFA 1? TIFA 2, another tax increment area supporting the downtown. You can see the tax estimated capture, 160,000 coming in. Not a lot of major ones. A lot of this gets transferred out to some park and debt. Not park and deck. Some debt service as well.
That debt service is supporting this building.
That's right.
And there is a little bit of money built up in there for a future project. That's the one that has a little bit.
Anything else with TIFA 1, TIFA 2, DDA? TIFA 1, TIFA 2, DDA. All right, the next couple of set of funds are our IT and employee health insurance. We are self-funded regarding health insurance. Information systems, flipping to the next page, you can see there we have our revenues coming in. So like I said, we do charge for services between the various departments and funds within the organization. This is funding down in their appropriations, our IT director, Bonnie, and a lot of her necessary expenses that we have in there. One that kind of points out is our software and license and maintenance. That one has kind of steadily gone up. We found new ways of being a little bit more efficient or putting in some of the required software that we have. So there is an increase in that. Communications, I believe that's all of our phones throughout the organization. We have some of our printers and copiers in this budget as well. Overall, about $535,000 for information systems. Included in the budget is also our GIS system, which is housed in engineering, but because it's an IT function, we put most of the expenses minus the employee in this fund as well. So not a lot of major increases. Like I said, there's some cost increases with software. As we've changed some of our systems, we put in new softwares in place. GIS system, not a major change there. And then you see the one capital request that we had for the IT department at $20,000 for new computers and laptops. It's not replacing all of them, but a portion of them.
The large increase in software is because we decided to pull it from other funds that were temporarily charged to.
Yeah.
So that was mainly sewer and water.
Yeah. We have all of our software kind of under one umbrella. It's a little bit easier to manage that way. Bonnie has a whole list of all the different software services that we currently have, whether it be very specific for water and sewer or what's the one we use for marketing? Canva. I mean, everything big and small and everything in between there. Any questions on IT funds? Okay. Employee health insurance. As I mentioned, we're self-funded with employee health insurance. So this is kind of a breakout of some of the employee and employer contributions throughout the organization, the revenues coming in, as well as the expenditures going out for active employees on the health insurance plan, as well as some of the retiree benefits that are covered. All in all, I think we're holding pretty steady. I mean, we're not really anticipating any major health insurance increases, so I think we're doing pretty good there.
The last reports we got, the performance was doing quite well. Our claims are under what they were anticipated to be, so
Yeah.
everybody's healthy.
Thanks a lot. So, any questions on employee health insurance or anything? Okay. All right, going into the next one is our parking fund. As an enterprise, we have parking and parking deck operations. First one is parking, which is surface parking. You see the anticipated revenue that we see from meter receipts, annual permits, interest earnings. It's not a huge fund. Anticipating about $234,000. Going down to the appropriations, this pays for a portion of our meter enforcement officer. She's also charged out to where's she charged?
Parking deck.
Parking deck, yes. She's charged out to parking deck. We do have budgeted in there part-time seasonal wages. Sherilyn's picked up a lot of work. We used to have a part-time meter repair person, and she's doing a lot of the running around, collecting all the quarters on the machines, doing some of the work, coordinating with DPW. So we have a part-time person in there to offset some of her daytime enforcement hours during the summer months. Again, major changes to the budget. There really aren't anything. It's pretty straightforward in terms of what she's operating on. Department 441, just some internal services, utilities. Nothing major there. Anything with parking deck? Or, excuse me, surface parking? Not parking deck. All right, now we'll go to parking deck. Parking deck, we have our breakout of our revenues at the top there, about $455,000 anticipated for next year between contributions to debt and operations from the hospital. Some transfer in from the general fund. No, we don't have that next year. Transfer in from TIF 1. We talked about that debt coming in. Annual permits, about $47,000 in permits. Transient revenue, people using the garage that don't have permits, about $15,000. Appropriations, parking deck enforcement. Again, that's the other portion of Sherilyn. She works in the parking deck, so she is charged out to there. Not a lot of major increases in the expenditures. There's some charges in there for accounting management, computer services. They're all pretty status quo moving forward. Department 441 is the operating expenses. Again, nothing major in that one moving forward either.
It's been a while since I was on, but is the parking deck still primarily managed by the DDA, or is it DPW, or?
It's combination, DPW, police department, finance, a little bit of Robin's time, kind of corral all that stuff together, so
Team effort.
it's a team effort,
How fun.
so. Any other questions regarding parking deck, parking surface? Okay. All right. I think that's it for that. We do have some other funds down here. Starting off on page 71, Seal Operating Fund, Osborne Trust, Perpetual Care, Seal Estate Trust, Osborne, Brownfield, LDFA, Special Gaming, Special Revenue Fund, Gaming Compact. Tell you the truth, these are all real quick, easy budgets. There's nothing major in there. They're trust funds, they hold funds. I don't think there's much in there. If you guys want to go through them, we can go through them, but otherwise I'd say just kind of skip them. If you have any questions, then we can go into them, but
Can I just ask a general question? What typical rate are we seeing on those trust fund interest?
Typical rate that we're receiving, did you ask? It's around 5%, a little over 5% right now. Would you agree? Okay.
yeah. So that's the budget. That is our fiscal year 24-25 anticipated budget for next year. You know, I didn't do it at the beginning, but I'm gonna do it right now. You know, this is a lot of work that goes into this. Certainly Kristen and Callie need a big thank you for pulling this together. I can honestly say this literally would not happen with the two of them because Robin and I probably wouldn't do it either. So Kristen and Callie put a lot of time, a lot of effort into it. There's a lot of background work between Excel sheets and managing the data. Couple of department heads already left, but certainly it's a lot of work for the department heads to put together their budgets, following the timelines. I mean, everybody does a great job with this process, so a lot of kudos to everybody that put their time and energy and effort into this budget. So I want to thank everybody for that. I guess the one last item we just kind of talked about, there was a wish, and I can go either way, however the commission deems it necessary to move forward. There's one wish item. You guys can rectify that tonight. We have some information we can probably provide you if there's any questions, or we can move forward with the special meeting next Monday for the one item. So however you guys want to move forward. I guess we'd look for any kind of direction or decision or discussion from the commission on that.
See if we can knock it out tonight, if we have enough information.
I guess we will turn it over to the commission then. So the one wish was to add in the DDA's salary. As I mentioned, the theory behind that was there's still talks about merging the two positions. Neither board has really made any major decision not to. There was, to Commissioner Rubenstein's point, there was some interest in combining those positions. I guess I would just say from my perspective and some of the conversations, I think there's an opportunity, and I think there's some people that see that there could be a different way of doing some of these things to where the position could be a little bit more appealing to an individual. There is a lot of overlap between kind of what their services they provide in terms of business development, business expansion. You know, it's not really a geographic designation, but for the most part, the position was cut with the contingency. There was a department request at about $60,000, which I believe was the wages before. So your department requested in that item has those funds in there, so you can kind of see the difference. But other than that, I guess I would turn it back over to the commission if there's any other information you want to see or anything else. But the information kind of is in the budget within the department requested versus the manager recommended.
Excuse me, I added up the fringe benefits because some of them were removed and some of them just left in. And I come up with a grand total of $84,005. And that's, a big one is the health insurance because we budget for as if someone has a family and you don't really know at this point, but that would be the budget added back.
For which one?
For
DDA.
DDA director,
DDA?
the total cost with wages of $60,000 that Brian mentioned, but then $24,500 in fringe benefits added back.
I'm a proponent of going forward the way it is, and I think, as you said, if those conversations don't happen, then we can do a budget amendment at that time. I know Brian's had discussions with both the DDA chair and the EDC chair, and they both are very supportive of the concept. And the concept is actually being talked about Friday at the Smart Zone meeting. As you may or may not know, the Smart Zone has funding source for the position, and it's a different, as Brian said, it's a innovative, different way of looking at it. And the Smart Zone has a couple of people from, one from MEDC, from the oversight agency, and they're pretty excited about the concept. They think it's, there are a lot of synergies between the three different boards and agencies. And they think it's a concept that could be very successful, innovative, if we move forward.
Yep.
So I know that if those boards look at it, then Brian will be bringing it forward to us to talk about.
Yep.
Even though we don't need to technically approve it. Yes, sir.
Oh, sorry, I didn't know if you called on me or not. No, I mean, I think, you know, in general, I understand Commissioner Boost's point, I understand Mayor Gary's point. You know, I think, you know, when we heard from Director Collins that $81,000 in the contingency budget would cover a DDA position, I am satisfied with it being in that pot and sitting where it is. I think in general, you know, I know that it's been discussed, and I know that it's really more up to the DDA and the EDC boards and the Smart Zone boards to talk about merging their position. But there's an old African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I think that encouraging a conversation where everybody is on board maybe is better. Because in general, I can understand why the merge would be appealing, but I have a lot of questions and a lot of confusion myself. So I'm not saying that I wouldn't necessarily support it, but in general, I don't know what it is, right? And I know that that's a conversation that's still in flux and still being discussed. I think these are important positions, and so I would want to hopefully be included from a city commission perspective. I hope that we're all able to be included because, you know, I know that it's not really up, it's more to their boards, but, you know, as fairly prominent folks in the community, these are city departments in some respects. We're gonna have to answer questions like why do we merge them or that kind of stuff. And it'd be good to have answers and be out front of it so we can bring people along with us so we can go far together. That's my only 2 cents.
Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to be very clear. This, to me, is not an issue of whether or not the position is eliminated or kept. I personally have very strong feelings upon that. This is an issue of procedure and a procedural question. Currently, again, the position is on the books. The position has not been eliminated. We are building a budget with a position that is on the books. Why would we build it in a contingency budget for a position that we currently have? The position is there. It's funded. It should be funded within the budget. It shouldn't be funded within a contingency plan. If we decide, if those boards decide to, at that point, get rid of that position, then at that point, that budget should be amended the opposite way. We shouldn't be putting the cart before the horse and doing the opposite of what should be happening. The proper procedural way to amend this budget is to put it in the budget of what the position is on the books currently and amend it when that position is eliminated, not the opposite way around. This is procedural in my mind. Thank you.
Technically, the positions aren't there. There's nobody in the position. They're,
Both those positions are positions that are positions within the organizations. They're in the org charts right now, are they not?
I don't even think they go by that. The EDC has not even put together a, I don't know what you'd call it, a profile for the search. They haven't even moved forward with that yet, so.
And I would say that
It's not.
the EDC did amend their budget beginning of winter, end of fall, early winter, somewhere around there. They did amend their budget to take out that position. That was an action that the EDC board did themselves a few months ago. So, I mean, they did technically write that out themselves.
And again, I addressed the DDA director position. Is it in their org chart right now?
I mean, to be fair, we don't really have an org chart. So, I mean, I don't know how to answer that question. I mean, is it, I don't know how to answer that question. I mean, we don't have necessarily an org chart in place. I mean, we've got a general thing that we use for some presentations, but, I mean, I don't know. I don't have a really good answer for that one. But I guess, just nudged along, just like any other item, if there's no further discussion, I guess, is there, not to steal your thunder, but any motion or anything like that the commission would like to entertain?
Well, we don't really make any motions at this meeting, so. Are we getting?
Oh.
Yeah. So are we, the question is, are we gonna keep it a wish, and are we gonna have staff go through the information, and are we gonna have a meeting next Monday to talk about this one issue?
What we normally take, we take that week to assemble the cost.
Correct.
But since the cost is readily available in the
Known, yeah.
budget, so you could, if the commission chooses, you could vote tonight, and then we wouldn't have a meeting next week, if you were ready to vote.
But are we allowed to vote at a
No.
work session? Yeah.
This is a work session, I think.
Post a public meeting, it's a special, it's a special city commission meeting.
Okay, so I would
Okay.
say,
Is there, Your Honor, question?
So I guess to throw it back onto a vote, then we'd have to have a, motion to add that item into our agenda. It would have to be unanimous vote.
Is there a,
Correct?
right, is there a deadline to add, like, can we do it at a regular city commission meeting, or does it have to be a special city commission meeting? And if it has to be a special city commission meeting, can it be right directly before a regularly scheduled city commission meeting?
So I would say our process, so we have the budget hearing meetings this week, we have a budget reconciliation. That's April, we've already had our second meeting. So the first meeting in May is usually the first reading of the budget, followed by adoption, the second meeting, or is it in June? The second meeting. So the first meeting in May, there's just the public hearing. In theory, what you could do is at that meeting, the public hearing, things can change after the public hearing. There is no obligation to redo a public hearing should the commission make a change. Public hearings are just that, to get input with the expectation or assumption that there could be something to change. So we could do the public hearing at the first meeting of the May, and at that time, have an item on there for direction from the commission if they want to add it back in or not. Even at that point, we could do a budget amendment that's probably preset for next year as well if we wanted to, but I think in theory, we could do the public hearing, the first meeting of May, have that discussion, have that decision, follow up with a final draft on the second meeting in May. Am I off base on that?
So the first meeting in May is where the recommended budget gets presented, schedule the public hearings for the second meeting in May.
Oh, so I am off a meeting. So technically, we could just do the presentation of the meeting or a presentation of the budget, have that discussion. If it goes forward, update the budget for the public hearing at the one. So yes, there is time to do it at a normal commission meeting. We can work. And this isn't a major change, so to say. So it's possible. It is possible to do this in short. This is possible to do it at the,
So is the wish for both component units, or are you just singling out DDA?
Sounds to me like the EDC has already eliminated theirs, so I'm completely, as I mentioned, the DDA.
Necessarily think it's that we eliminated ours, I just think that we're comfortable with our fund balance when it gets added back in, whichever direction we go.
if it gets added back in, yeah. But I mean, it's not in the line item right now.
Right.
For the DDA, when you're considering this at that first meeting in May, you'll want to decide if you are going to increase the appropriation by that same amount.
Well, that's what, we'd have all those components outlined, yeah.
And the DDA will have to review the budget recommendation or not?
Yeah, they
Skip
gotta
over
do
them.
that stuff too.
Can I ask a question in regards to one thing that you mentioned? You said that there was a request from the department in regards to funding for that. Where did that request come from? Like within the department?
I see what you're
Just because
saying.
they're without a director.
That came from us putting together the budget. So they were supposed, the DDA was supposed to meet last week to go over their budget, but they didn't have quorums, they didn't. So even with the component units, whether it be the board or the executive director, whatever the case may be, they do make a recommendation with the budget. It moves into my process where I still make a manager's recommendation. So the fact that the position was in there, we took the standpoint of, all right, if we were the department, would we add it back in there? We added it back in there, but then followed up with, all right, now I'm making my manager's recommendation, and this is what I'm recommending.
So it's like a quad.
Yeah, yeah.
Did your fingers up for a question?
No.
Oh. All right, so we have the one wish, correct?
Correct, we have the one wish,
And we'll resolve that at our next regularly scheduled meeting.
that'll work.
And we'll have the information then in our packet for the next meeting.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Anything else?
No, sir.
All right, item C, matters presented by the
Oh.
public. Anybody in the audience that has any questions, comments?
I forgot we had to do
Feedback?
that.
Any matters presented by the city commission? Need a motion to adjourn. Commissioner Bosphus Rath, I think it was.
I will make that motion to adjourn.
Support.